world. Hello. Hey, welcome to the Death of a Dream podcast. It's a thing. We're going live. It may have just popped up on your phone. Hi. Uh, okay. Here is my great thing from yesterday. You know, last week, or maybe this week, it was probably a little while ago, we started adding in, not only asking what was the great part about my children's day, but we also started asking what was the worst part. Because I think for me, childhood was really just about like light. There was no darkness. And I continued to escape the darkness as much as I possibly could. And like, listen, that's what childhood is supposed to be about, right? Like, it's supposed to be joyful and running and jumping and doing the things you love. Like, we want to protect that. We want to put them in this little box and allow them to feel that. And for me, I was just allowed to feel that. And it was like we kind of just avoided that anything else existed, that there were any other realities in this world, that it was going to be good forever. And I remember being hit with that pretty early on into adulthood. Now, I was hit via divorce, like right in the timeline of me really needing to understand what my identity was. Right in that moment, I was hit pretty hard with that. And I think that drastically changed the trajectory of where I ended up going. But I think it all revolves around this idea that I was able to live in this kind of untouched world, and that was fiercely protected. And I never had to think about what I didn't, what like made me sad or uncomfortable. And like, if I brought that up, everybody would just be like, it's okay, you'll get through this, no big deal. And we masked it, right? We just pretended like it was never gonna catch us, like we could outrun it forever. And so last week we started adding in the second question to that. What was the best part of your day? What was the worst part of your day? And last night I heard my 4-year-old be me. I heard it. And she said, nothing, it was all good. And I was like, okay, well, was there anything? Nope. It was all great. So then she's sitting there and she's kind of just stewing on that thought, right? And we move on to her sister and we start talking to her. And all of a sudden my 4-year-old kind of sits up and she goes, there was a bad part. Right? And she has to sit with this for a while. We probably went 5 minutes before she sat up and said that. And then she's almost brought to tears. And this isn't meant to be like a low-lying depression type exercise, but it is meant to test this idea of like, what if we embrace emotions both ways? And we start to acknowledge that there's good and bad. And we start to have conversations around that. Like, what happens? Where do we go? Where do we end up? How does this help to grow and blossom them into a better person in this world? So it's like a live test. It's the entirety of this. And so she's sitting there and then she's brought to tears and she said, you know what? It started to get cloudy and stormy and that made me really scared and sad. And she still wasn't ready to fully talk about it, but she at least like let us into this idea and this fact that there was a bad part, there was a scary part, there was something that impacted her day in a negative way. And this was kind of the first time that she really dug into that she actually brought full emotions to that. And we're still going to dig in. She wasn't quite ready to let us all the way in. And I totally get where she's coming from, because it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. I just peeled off this one layer. I'm not fully ready to dive into this yet. We'll have to keep coming back. And for us, that's on us as parents, right? To continue the consistency of this practice, to keep asking those questions, to keep making it a normal part of their day. So sharing that doesn't hold some sort of discomfort, right? And pretending that that doesn't exist, because I think that's how we build childhood. That's what we think our kids need, right? They just need light and love and beauty, and they absolutely do, and they absolutely deserve it. But there's this other side, right, where we can't protect them from things that are humanly, like, that's a human experience. That is going to happen. That is a high-low possibility. I can't protect them from feeling those things, right? They're going to have stormy days where they are completely consumed by their emotions. And how am I helping them process that? And the best way I can think is to just start having the conversation and make it a normal piece of what we talk about, because there's this discomfort, because I know firsthand that it's hard to not be happy. And being happy is one of the very things that people appreciate about me. And so it's really hard to be the rain cloud in a room for me. And my 4-year-old shares and exhibits similar traits to the ones, personality traits to the ones that I have. And so it's almost more important for her and for me, as I work to develop and know and grow and understand her, it's more important for me to develop this practice for her, knowing how jolted I was by adulthood, right? And how protected I was, honestly. I grew up in a bubble where bad things happened to other people, but they didn't happen to me. And so when I was hit with this reality that not everybody grew up with the same experience, not everybody grew up with the same things, when I'm hit with that, and then I'm hit with the second dose where it's like, whoa, now you will have and be impacted by similar things. I was blindsided. I had no tools in my tool belt to handle the lows and to know how to rebuild my life from nothing. Because my foundation essentially was perfectly built for me. And then all of a sudden it was like the rug was ripped out from under me, and I had no idea how to navigate. And so I'm trying to build a world where navigation, where I'm not building up this false narrative that bad doesn't exist just because there's so much good here. Right? And that's a continued work. But last night, my great thing was finally being able to tap into that, even though I know that that's severely uncomfortable for my 4-year-old. And I know because it's severely uncomfortable for me. Even every time that we talk about it, I'm like, ugh, okay, just prepare. This is good. This is good. This is good. This is a good practice. Just prepare yourself. Just breathe. It's okay. It's okay for them to feel pain. It's okay for you to feel pain. It's going to happen every day. We need to talk about it because it's going to happen. It has to happen. Hannah, you can't fast forward through the bad parts in a movie. You can't just walk out of the room. It's okay for you to feel that discomfort. It's okay. It's going to happen. It happens. Breathe. You'll be okay feeling this too. And so that's what we're implementing, right? And for my 7-year-old, she's a lot like her dad. Blessed be. Thank goodness. Somebody needed to be. Me and my 4-year-old. I don't know how the world will handle us, but we'll figure it out, right? And her type really belongs in this like level of perfection. And so it's vital for her to practice this as well, right? And for my husband to practice it, and for me to practice it, because all of us want to believe that a perfect world exists and that that's the only place where we belong. And it doesn't, and it isn't. That's all. So, my great thing is that we finally tapped in. We tapped in a little bit, especially with the one who had the biggest wall up. Maybe it was me. No, it was my 4-year-old. Trust. But we're working on learning them too. That's a part of parenting. It's amazing, right? Like, amazing and the scariest thing ever. Because you essentially have a blank canvas. And everything that you do is a paint stroke. And you don't know which ones are going to show up most in their painting. And you don't get to decide that. But you are the one that's putting those initial brush strokes on. You're the one responsible for that. And no, trust. It's deep and crazy. It's so deep and crazy, I can't even. Okay, so that's my great thing. Take time, actual time for yourself today, right? Today to start talking about, to start having conversations about your own greatness. It's vital, and that's what we're going to talk about today a little bit. Not greatness so much. But here's the deal. This podcast, this today, we're talking about how to better control what is in your control. And I was served up. Oh, thank you. See, this is where the algorithm is a blessing, right? Because it can serve you things that serve you. And when you call on the universe or the algorithm, which is the universe essentially that we're living in, when we call on it, it will continue to provide. That is its job. It learns you. It knows you. And so I was beautifully served this quote. And it's from Awakening Women's Support. And I shared it on my Instagram story if you want to follow them. In relationship, it's each person's responsibility to do what they need to do to heal themselves, release and overcome past trauma, and work on their own emotional triggers. It's not others' jobs to heal the other. We can't heal anyone. We can support and hold space, but we can't do the work for the other. Dang. That's deep, right? And, you know, what I was just talking about, as a parent, you do have some of that responsibility because you are the sole provider of that foundation. You are the initial experiences, right? But even as I do this work, right? It's a scary thing to be responsible for an audience of people who are coming here for knowledge. But I think at the end of the day, we really have this ability. And most of what I do really is just that, just what they said in the quote. Support and hold space. But at the end of the day, I'm just another opinion. I'm just another person, right, in the way that the world works. I'm just a voice. I'm just an addition to who you might be. And I'm really just here to hold space and support you, and also challenge you and push you to think a little bit differently. And I'm not trying to sway you any one way or the other. And believe me, if you ever feel like that is a part of the message, it's not meant to be. It really is just to continue pushing who you are and where you're meant to go. And my 4-year-old is in here right now. Do you want to say hi? No, she does not want to say hi. Okay. So that's what this is, right? That's where we continue to see this work grow. We continue to see this movement happen. Sorry, had to have a slight pause. Okay. Refocus. So, in terms of how to control what is in your control, your resources. Bottom line, if everything looks and feels the same, start reaching out, or at least start learning. Because my biggest goal is to challenge that, to call in new resources, to start to question how we got here in the first place, right? And the biggest piece of that quote that I think is important is you're responsible for your own healing. Period. Because I can suggest things, and really I'm just a storyteller. I'm just telling you how my life has worked up until this point, right? I'm just telling you resources that helped me through things, right? Resources that helped me heal from my own traumas, resources and things that helped me push past where I was, right? Push past this feeling of being lost, push past this feeling of my life being just fine and me not really knowing how to show up for that, right? Like, how do we get past that? How do we keep moving in a forward direction? How do we dream, right? When some of us weren't really all that equipped to dream in the first place. And that's honestly how I feel every day. Like, I don't know. Sorry. When the children wake up, it's not the way that the world is supposed to work. They're supposed to stay asleep through this time. So, I wasn't all that equipped to handle. Like, literally, I had no idea. I had this idea of what I wanted to do, and I wasn't made aware of the fact that it might not happen. I really just blindly chased that, and no one gave me that dose of reality until I was, 19. And they were like, hey, I hate to break it to you, right? And I'm sure that there were plenty of people whispering, but no one would ever say it to my face. And I had been raised in this, demented reality where no sadness could touch me, and everybody only appreciated the fact that I was super happy and inspiring and had these crazy dreams, and that's so amazing because she's gonna make it happen. And no one ever hit me with this dose of reality that might not happen. I just kept blindly chasing it, and I think everyone was just like, let's just protect her, she's good, she's okay. And then all of a sudden the whole world came crashing down around me, and I was not built with anything to know how to rebuild, right? To know how to start from scratch, to even fully understand that this was possible, that sadness was possible, that terrible things happened. I had really no idea. And I definitely wasn't built with tools to understand how to process that. Because I didn't have to. There was no real reason to understand this, right? And so eventually, when I survived that moment, and it took 11 years? It took 11 years of like really sitting in the lowness and continuing to pretend to show up as this healed and whole person, even though I knew in my soul that this is not who I was, right? This was just like who I ended up showing up as after I gave up on who I wanted to be. And it all happened by default. You know, I had goals and dreams, but they really were only built out of an insecure foundation. Like they really were only built out of this idea that I had just failed, and now I'm just a failure. And so the rest of my life will just be built as a failed instance of who I was supposed to be. And what I can tell you today is I didn't believe that it was in my control, right? Actually, one of the reasons that I wanted to start coaching at a private school is because I wanted to see if you are a product of your environment, right? Like maybe I ended up where I ended up because of kind of the soil that I was planted in, right? Like, why is the percentage of success higher here? Is it that the education is so much better? I think it's this. I think that we absolutely grow where we're planted. And so depending on who you're surrounded with, if you're surrounded by people, whether they had privilege, whether they didn't, if you're surrounded by people who are yes people and they make things happen, you are going to be impacted by that. Because you're going to see success all around you for your whole life. Imagine what that does to you. Imagine what that does to your beliefs. Imagine how that informs your decisions. You've seen success. But when you're surrounded by, and sometimes it's inescapable, and a lot of times it's completely inescapable, right? Like you could leave school and you could leave an environment maybe that's toxic, but now that it's ever looming on our phones, that we're building communities outside of our community, sometimes you can't escape it, right? Sometimes it's ever looming. And so you owe it to yourself to start controlling what you can control. No, you can't just go back to school and sign up and surround yourself with those people, but you can maybe start to build that into your social network. And you say like, oh, Hannah, how do you do that? Well, first you just start by liking and following those people. Next, you can start to build relationships, right? Like I'm always amazed at the people who do respond to like just a comment or popping in and saying, hey, I really think that you're amazing. I'm just saying, I know that that seems weird. And some people will go, that's really weird and that's not for me. So bye, right? And then you just keep going. Not everybody's going to be for you. But I want you to control what is in your control. And what is in your control are the networks that you're building around yourself. And we talked about that yesterday. And that's not just to like push a narrative and to get you to think one way. That's just the reality. You are building your community by who you surround yourself with. And you will be a product of that environment. And so if those environments are sitting here and saying, don't dream too big, you've gone crazy, it's going to be hard to escape that narrative because it's constant, because it's always around you, right? And so you can build this new world that you live in. You can. Until you find one where you want to exist next. But the biggest piece is you are the only one who can sign up to do this work, right? Like, I'm sitting here telling a story, pushing a narrative, trying to represent a class and a form of people that I didn't see well enough represented. That's what I'm doing, right? Like, if you're middle class, if you just grew up and started to sign up for fine because that's what we're told, that's how we're raised, right? Like, that's where I was raised. I was pretty sure by the age of 10 that creative paths weren't realistic ones, right? Like podcasting or writing or dancing or singing or whatever. And so probably at that age, I just turned it off as not being something that I could do. Not being something that I could be successful at. And success to me in the middle class, in the Midwest, in wherever I grew up, looked like money. And that's what I was told to chase. And that's just never done it for me, right? But I grew up in this world that was telling me that that's the only thing that's important. But for me, freedom and passion are important. Loving what I do, loving who I'm surrounded with and what I get to do and how I get to impact the world, that's what does it for me. I know. And so it was hard being planted in a world that didn't appreciate those things. And it's okay, right? If you're sitting here and you're listening and you're going, oh, but I love money and I love things and that really does it for me, that's perfectly fine, right? Just know. Just know and don't settle for what someone's telling you to be about. Like, even as I'm sitting here telling you that that's what I'm about, don't go, yeah, that's what I'm about too. That's what I'm about too. That's what I'm about too. Because it might not be. And that's okay, right? That's what this is about. How to better control what's in your control. The first thing that you can do is actually start standing up for the things that you do know are true to you. Right? Start being the person you want to be. And stop listening to the voices in your head, because a lot of those voices are built around things you were probably told when you were 6. Right? And so oftentimes, if we weren't born in environments that were built for you to thrive, for you to fly, right? Like, sometimes we're built in these places where our trajectories are communicated as limited compared to everywhere else. And so it becomes our jobs to heal from that. It becomes our job to start taking control and to start finally living life on our terms. It is in your control. Your life is in your control. 100%. And you owe it to yourself to start feeding your mind with resources that continue to call on you to do that work. Keep digging, keep going. You're so worth it. You're so worth that work. And you're the only one who can sign up to do that. As always, you're smart, you're strong, you're beautiful. What are you going to do? Change the